Good evening. My name is Marcus Mabry, and I have the great honor of being the president of the Overseas Press Club of America. Thank you. For more than 3/4 of a century, the OPC has celebrated and defended the best in international journalism. In recent years, we have expanded that mission to include helping to prepare journalists and journalism students for the demands of covering our world. We have raised our voice against mounting media oppression in countries like China, Russia, and Turkey. This work is more vital than ever, even as it is more dangerous, and yet you do it every day. You confront slaveholders and corporations that abandon their own ideals. You confront governments, and you confront terrorists in the field, and sometimes even in our offices, and even in the case of Bangladeshi journalist and LGBT activist Julas Manan, in our very homes. To help us work in this dangerous landscape, the OPC was one of the first signatories to the Principles to Protect Journalists assigned to dangerous reporting abroad. In carrying out our mission and adopting it for these times, we continue a proud tradition, a tradition embodied by giants of our profession who dared to challenge the world to be better. David Fanning is one of those giants. David was a pioneering catalyst in news documentary in the 1970s, and for the next 4 decades, he showed the world the power of international journalism when backed by passion, intelligence, and a fearless dedication to get at the truth. All along the way, among his many honors, he earned 8 Emmys, and in 2013 received a Lifetime Achievement Emmy in honor of his work. And yet, his successor as executive producer of Frontline, Rainey Aronson, and her team may constitute an even greater legacy. Watch how many awards they will take home tonight. Now, a little about Frontline.
There really isn't anywhere else in journalism that does what we do. The issues that we began to wrestle with in the first season of Frontline are as vivid today as they were then.
Because 2 guns were kept in a bedroom drawer, ready and waiting, my granddaughter will be without a mother.
My daughter survived, but not before witnessing her friends and her teacher slaughtered in front of her.
We will always have miscarriages of justice. We will always have people in high places who abuse their power, and reckless policies in far-off places.
Everybody knew what was happening in Rwanda.
It made no difference what you said or how you said it. The world just didn't care.
Frontline represents the idea that we can take a path through this forest of information and draw a bright line through it and make sense of the world.
If there is a God, what is happening?
Frontline raised questions about the decision to go to war in Iraq within months of 9/11.
There are people in the State Department that refer to what is going on in the Pentagon as the cabal that is absolutely determined to lay the groundwork to get Saddam out with the use of American military troops.
We followed the troops into Baghdad. We stayed with the story through difficult times.
Garcia! He went out fighting, and he died like he should.
The best of Frontline, you come into the beginning of a story thinking you know something, and you come out the other end being surprised by what you found.
You just made it up?
Just telling them what they wanted to hear.
The stories of people, and people you care about, and people you love to hate.
What do you have to say to the public, to your investors?
So is this easy money that you're making with Madoff?
Easy. Easy peasy.
Our job at Frontline is to take this very special idea of literate narrative journalism and to publish it in as many places as possible, out to people through social media, to create connections to people who care about these ideas and who also care about Frontline and about public broadcasting, and to publish all the supporting materials and the extended interviews in a way that makes our journalism transparent. That is as close to the mission of public broadcasting as I can imagine.
All I want is the truth now. Just give me some truth now.
This idea, this commitment, this mission is valuable to us as a country and to us as citizens. Television that is important for the future as much as it is for the present.
David?
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you so much.
Actually, can I see that?
Thank you.
In recognition of pioneering and peerless work in international broadcast journalism, for 5 decades of setting the bar for dynamic and exclusive investigative reporting as the leader of World and then Frontline, for his role in mentoring generations of journalists and filmmakers, for his fearless determination to speak truth to power, and for his restless dedication to confront and undermine injustice, I present the President's Award of the Overseas Press Club of America to David Edward Fanning.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Goodness me. What an extraordinary honor. Over the years, I've been to many of these gatherings and always been in awe of the courageous and terribly smart people who are honored here. I certainly never imagined I would join them. I'm humbled. Thank you, Marcus, all of the Overseas Press Club, for honoring Frontline in my name. This means all the more to me because so much of my professional life has been defined by trying to understand our place and my own in the world. Growing up in the 1950s and 60s in South Africa in a small provincial town with no television, the government in its wisdom decided it was just too dangerous a medium and so banned it until 1976, well after I left the country. We lay on the hot cement next to the public swimming pool, tuning into the shortwave crackles of Radio Lorenzo Marques in Portuguese East Africa, now Mozambique, desperate to catch an echo of a world beyond our town, and mostly to hear the thrilling sounds of Elvis Presley and Jailhouse Rock, banned on the local radio. I was blessed, though, that my mother made her twice-weekly trip to the library and returned with books which piled up on the table next to her chair, and I read late at night. They were mostly non-fiction, biographies, and travel. Peter Fleming, Patrick Leigh Fermor, Wilfred Thesiger. They fed my curiosity and inspired me to make my own journey in time to teach myself to report and even make some films about my own country and later others. I am in a way an accidental journalist. There was no school of journalism, but I discovered the intense gathering of my university newspaper and ended up as the editor, as much because it put me in the midst of the excitement of student politics in 1968, but also because the stakes were so high there. The government banned some of my friends. We occupied the administration building. We began to connect to a world beyond ourselves. I still had no idea what a television documentary looked like when I accompanied a friend, a cultural anthropologist, working on his thesis into Soweto, the vast township outside of Johannesburg, with a borrowed camera and two 400-foot rolls of 16mm film. It was terra incognita then for white South Africans who were not the police, so the privilege of entering that world was extraordinary. And I remember when we shot those first few frames, the congregation of an African independent church, a tiny group of just 18 people, all members of the minister's family. They were called the Bantu Bethlehem Christian Catholic Church in Zion of South Africa, all around the world. Just 18 of them, all members. They brought together that Sunday to escape the horrors of the apartheid world outside. Backlit by the morning sun, in white robes, singing as they entered a little pond for baptism. I turned on the camera, and every frame of that roll of film I'd bought mattered. Sixpence, sixpence, sixpence. I heard it roll past. It was precious. The image, the place, the purpose. Years later, I was living on a beach in California when I got a call from a man called Peter McGee, who was at WGBH in Boston, the public television station that seemed as unattainable as Harvard. I knew someone who'd impressed me because he'd had an interview for a job at Nova. Anyway, Peter had seen a film that I'd made about the civil war in Angola in 1975, a small film, an explainer, made for no money, cobbled together with bought news footage, Washington interviews, and a map on the studio floor. He saw enough in it to suggest we meet on a forthcoming trip in Los Angeles. He told me about a series he was developing called Simply World. I'd left South Africa with my second film, sold it to the BBC, and in 1972 made my way to California, where I walked into a little public television station and hung about long enough, volunteering, until they gave me a job as a cinematographer editor. I began to teach myself. I made a half-dozen films around California, and one called Deep South, Deep North, 20 years after the Brown decision, in Detroit and Alabama, exploring images so reminiscent of South Africa. I flew with Rosa Parks from Detroit to Montgomery, and she rode a bus for me. There is a wonder to this business, a privilege, the license granted to be curious, and with it, an obligation to the purpose. So I was excited to make films for Peter's proposed new series World, Jamaica, Lebanon, Northern Ireland, where I'd done a spell for BBC News, but no, he was looking for someone called an executive producer. That was the guy at the station who put his name at the end of my film. I said no. Thanks, no. A day later, I woke up and wrote him a passionate letter about all the ideas he should be thinking about, and Peter invited me to come to Boston. There I encountered an extraordinary institution that was WGBH. It was a place of ideas where teams of producers asked hard questions in a program called The Advocates, where Peter had produced a series called Arabs and Israelis, the production team half Jewish and half Palestinian, and who joined together to edit in Geneva. WGBH was where I really began my education as a journalist and to understand the dialogue between fairness and hard evidence. I also became an executive producer. World was described as a series about the world as others see it. And that first year, we gathered films from all over, traveled to meet foreign broadcasters, and found the filmmakers and the producers. The first film of the series was called The Clouded Window, about how we see the world, a coup in Thailand, riots in Egypt, covered by different international newscasts with completely different political interpretations of the content. I persuaded dear Dan Shaw to anchor it and made a wonderful poster with his picture on it saying, "Warning, the news you watch tonight is not the truth." There are many truths, many ways to see the world, and you all know in this room how hard it is to keep your compass boxed, to navigate and find a path through the shoals. I was so privileged to work with some of the smartest people making films around the world, and to be inside their edit rooms, to ask them how they got that, how they put those pieces together. So I found out what it takes to resist the easy edit, the quick manipulation, the dramatic emphasis, and I learned what to look for when it was just a little too neat. World ran for 5 years. Then in 1982, I was asked by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting to add domestic reporting and bring World home, to create a new 26-week-long documentary series, and that's how Frontline was born. I tell you this long-winded and self-indulgent story to say that the ideas, the concerns, and the purpose that the Overseas Press Club represents is at the very heart of Frontline. I don't have to tell you what you already know, that if we want to understand who we are, we have to know where we live and how the rest of the world has to survive. The crackle of my boyhood shortwave has been replaced by the cacophony of the age of Facebook and Twitter. Undifferentiated, it seems there are no boundaries, no story unremarked. And yet I still long for the stories of journeys, the deep and fascinating narratives I found in those books on my mother's table that tried to make sense of those encounters with a far-off world. We still need them, and I hope that's what we've tried to do at Frontline. I want to thank all of the prize winners here, past and present, for the extraordinary work you've done. Let me just acknowledge some of the people that make Frontline great, a few who are here tonight. Rainey Aronson, for 15 years as a producer, a senior producer, and a deputy executive producer, absorbed the lessons of Frontline and is now so capably running the series as executive producer with his deeper commitment to those ideas. Almost half of the current season of foreign films. There's my longtime colleague Martin Smith, who more than any single producer in the life of the series has dedicated himself to telling tough stories in hard places with grace and eloquence. Marcella Mabry. Marcella Gaviria, who has as much courage as anyone we know, has given us her own producing passions. Ken Dornstein, who once asked me if this really is a career, helped me shape Frontline World, our spin-off series that ran for 10 years. He's now revealed himself as a talented director whose film, My Brother's Bomber, is as good as it gets. Najibullah Qureshi continues to amaze us with his extraordinary bravery and enterprise in Afghanistan. Jamie Doran, the pirate captain who goes to places we often don't want to know about, and besides he wouldn't tell us anyway. Evan Williams, who brings such journalistic rigor and toughness in the most difficult places. Andrew Metz is the tough editor we all need. And my wife, Renata Simone, who has always been so my inspiration, my intellectual companion, and tough but fair critic. She's a talented filmmaker in her own right, whose epic series, The Age of AIDS, was one of Frontline's great contributions to understanding. I return her love and support in equal measure. Thank you. Thank you again for this honor. And in case you're wondering what I'm doing now, I just got back from Pakistan. I leave on Sunday for Norway, and then a few weeks later to Lebanon. I'm trying to get back to where once upon a time I left off. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Everyone,